Everyone, and welcome to Politics Today live on Channels Television. I'm Shoma Kimbaloe. Let's begin tonight by telling you that President Buhari has appointed Major General Farouk Yahaya as the new Chief of Army Staff. He's to replace Lieutenant General Ibrahim Attairu, who died in a plane crash in Kaduna State last Friday, alongside 10 other military officers. Before his appointment, Major General Yahaya was the General Officer commanding the 1st Division of the Nigerian Army and the Theater Commander of Operation Hadin Kai, a counter-terrorism military outfit in the Northeast. Can the Constitution amendment process help to resolve Nigeria's problems? That is our focus tonight, because if this exercise that is going on and the National Assembly is taking on will not help us resolve our problems, then it might be an exercise in futility, because Nigeria is faced with some challenges that are daunting. So tonight, my guest tonight will be giving us insight into what we need to look at, our focus, and what we need to pay attention to. But before we get into that, let's check out some of your political roundup stories.
President Muhammadu Buhari today received the President of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, at the State House in Abuja. The President of Ghana and the Chairman of the Economic Community of West African States is the third visiting African president received by President Buhari this week. President of the Libyan Presidential Council, Mohamed Yunus Menfi, and that of the Central African Republic earlier in the week entered into bilateral talks with the President. The Acting Inspector General of Police, Mr. Usman Alkali Baba, is worried that the disbandment of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS, has created a vacuum which is currently challenging efforts by the police to tackle insecurity in the country from a position of strength. The acting IGP made this known at a presidential briefing organized by the Presidential Communications Team at the State House today. And Nigerian governors have been speaking on the need for judicial and legislative autonomy for the justice system in Nigeria to work effectively. The governors of Sokoto and Ekiti States aired their views at a colloquium in honor of retiring Chief Judge of Ekiti State, Ayo Daramola, as he leaves office. The forum also created an opportunity for plights of arms of government to be discussed.
A round of applause. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, says recent attacks and arson on its facilities across the country is posing a major security threat to its planned activities, with over 1,500 ballot boxes and critical materials lost in over 40 attacks in the last 1 year. The INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, mentioned this during an emergency meeting with heads of security agencies in Abuja. He says the Anambra State governorship election and continuous voter registration exercise are just some of the activities topping INEC's agenda.
No doubt the last few weeks have been very challenging for the Commission. The spate of arson and vandalization targeting the Commission's facilities and property has become a major threat to our scheduled activities and the entire electoral process. In the last 2 years, the Commission has recorded a total of 41 incidents involving deliberate attack on the Commission's facilities. 9 of these incidents happened in 2019 and 21 cases in 2020. In the last 4 weeks, 11 offices of the Commission were either set ablaze or vandalized. 2 of these incidents were caused by Boko Haram and bandit attacks, while 10 resulted from thuggery during election and post-election violence. However, the majority of the attacks, 29 out of 41, were unrelated to elections or electoral activities. In fact, 18 of them occurred during the NSAS protests in October last year, while 11 attacks were organized by unknown gunmen and hoodlums. Although the Commission is assessing loss of materials during recent attacks, our preliminary assessment so far indicate that we lost 1,105 ballot boxes, 694 voting cubicles, 429 electric generating machines, and 13 utility vehicles. By working together with the security agencies, we can stop this attack.
So you heard the INEC chairman on what is happening in relation to the attacks on INEC facilities. But let's get started, shall we, on the issue of the constitutional amendment. The conversation tonight is not basically of what we did yesterday, because it's about the constitutional amendment, but we're critically looking at how would this document, this draft that the National Assembly is working on, how will it resolve our problems? Is day 2 of the public hearing on the constitutional amendment exercise embarked upon by the Nigerian Senate? More suggestions have been made through the presentations made. Many questions are also raised, some requiring answers, and the worry is that if the Constitution or this exercise will not help fix our insecurity challenges, it may be an exercise in futility. So some of the things that we saw, perhaps in one of the centers that I personally covered today, which is in Lagos, someone like Mr. Falana made a presentation saying that there is an urgent need for Nigerians and the National Assembly to look into areas that will help our situation as a people. Where do we go from here? So tonight, we're giving you a totally different perspective into this conversation. You've heard some of these discussed, and you're trying to wrap your head around where do we go from here. Well, tonight we have a constitutional lawyer and someone who has come out with a draft constitution alongside his partner. And we're hoping that it will help give some insight for someone who had gone through the process of drafting the Constitution. What next steps can Nigeria take at this crossroad? Mr. Dele Farotimi, a constitutional lawyer, he joins us tonight from Lagos. Thank you so much, Mr. Farotimi, for joining us tonight on the program. Let's begin the conversation. And I must sincerely appreciate when I was going through your book and the draft that you tagged, A New Nigeria is Possible. That is perhaps the prayer of a lot of us, that the new Nigeria that we dream and hope for will happen, and it will be soon. So let's begin the conversation. And I'd like to get your take on the public hearing or the process of trying to amend this document, because people have argued that we do not need an amendment, we just need to overhaul. Where do you stand on this?
Well, good evening, Sheung, and thank you very much for having me. I must correct an error that preceded the introduction. I am not a constitutional lawyer. I am simply a man who received a legal training. I'm simply a lawyer. All of us got taught constitutional law, but I'm not a specialist in constitutions. I must clear that up. I'm just another Nigerian. I happen to be a lawyer. Our constitution interests me because I believe it is the foundation of our problems. I believe that the bulk of the stress that the Nigerian state is facing today emanates directly from the imbalances imposed by the constitution that we have. So let me just clear that up quickly. But having said that, it is important that we understand that our problems are foundational. Foundational in the sense that when you hear the average Nigerian clamoring for self-determination, even the extreme that will speak of secession, almost each and every one of the several complaints, the rumblings within the Nigerian state emanates from the imbalances enshrined in what we today refer to as the 1999 Constitution. And it is my own firm belief that until we have resolved that foundational problem, we will not be able to progress as a people. And the further we run away from the truth that will resolve the problem, the deeper we get into the problem again. So yes, we have foundational problems. Yes, it has to do with our constitution. And yes, if we do not turn around, we would merely ground to a halt.
So yesterday, part of what we looked at was to look at the areas in which the public hearing is to focus on, or perhaps what the National Assembly says they're trying to do, learning from the failed process of the 7th and the 8th National Assembly. Do you want to clarify to us? I wanted to know your stand first and foremost, because it will also guide our conversation in the next few minutes. Do you think we need to overhaul? Do we need to overhaul, or we need to? Do you agree that is amendment that we need? Because some people said the amendment is not what we need. Overhaul is what we need to go for.
These are semantics. They are all semantics. There are several ways to skin a cat, and there are several roads to the market. There is a difference between legality and legitimacy. The current National Assembly has the legality to effect the fundamental changes required if it would then submit it to the people in a referendum, a bill for which it would have to raise anyway. But the key thing we must understand is that that National Assembly lacks legitimacy. It lacks legitimacy because it is itself predicated on a fraud. That fraud is the 1999 Constitution they are seeking to review. We have the unenviable task of deciding as a people whether we prefer to do the right thing or if we will persist in pursuit of a lie. Let me say this. The 1999 Constitution, which found the Assembly that is seeking the review today, is the mother lode of the Nigerian problem. That is the basis of all the argument. So we cannot walk away from the fact that you're asking the beneficiaries of an injustice, and that is the only way you can see this. Because when something says it is a constitution, it is then an expression of the people's will. The 1999 Constitution is not by any stretch of the imagination an expression of the Nigerians' will. However, the legal position today, whether we like it or not, however much we might speak Dogon Trenchi, is that there is indeed a National Assembly. Whether it is one that has legitimacy or not, it has legality. It is not surprising that they too are looking and they are talking about a review. It is almost impossible to ask them to remove the chair from underneath their own hats. But let's be clear. There has to be a radical departure from this cosmetic discussion about a review, because any review that does not deliver a substantial restructuring of the Nigerian Federation and a return to true federation is a waste of time, because the agitations will not stop. So if we're talking about the legality of a review, the National Assembly has the legal powers to review. But what do you review about a fraud? So a new constitution making process has to be initiated before this problem might be resolved. But to have a situation where what were 4 regions in 1966 have today become 36 states under the diktat of a military hegemony that does not in any way, shape, or form represent the aspiration of the Nigerian people themselves. It is not by accident that each time the Nigerians have given themselves constitutions, it's happened twice, 1960, 1963. They negotiated, they agreed, they disagreed. Those documents were products of negotiations. They were not impositions. To create the Midwest in 1963, there were plebiscites, the expression of the will of the people. But to have a situation where military imperators, essentially ethnic jingoists, sat down, substantially they turned what was a federal state into a feudal unitary dictatorship, and it is constitutionally so. So today, you have the situation.
Yeah. So apologies. We're due for a break, but I mean, we will continue with the conversation when we come back from the break, and you will please tell us, how can we birth a new constitution? Plus the explanation that you are giving now. But that's after the break, everyone. Join us again. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. Dele Farotimi, a Nigerian lawyer, has been talking to us on the program tonight. And our conversation is around how can the document called the Constitution help in resolving our present problem and challenges in the country, insecurity, and several other issues. Thank you so much, Mr. Farotimi, for your time tonight. Let me allow you to land on that thought, and afterwards you'll be able to tell us how we can come by a new constitution.
Well, the point I was seeking to make essentially is that ultimately we must understand that what we're having in Nigeria today is a crisis of legitimacy. The people are rebelling essentially against an unjust order. The problems you're seeing in the Southeast, the destruction of INEC infrastructure, all the agitations for self-determination, they are responses and reactions to perceived injustice. So most of these things cannot even be argued any further. So when we now begin to speak in terms of reviewing the Constitution that is essentially the source of this discontent, we don't seem to be getting it. You cannot cure the problem. If a house is defective, painting the house, if the foundation is defective, painting it is not going to cure the defect. You are simply going to need to bring it down and rebuild, or do whatever the structural engineers will suggest to be the problem in the solution. In our own case, we are of the firm persuasion that the only way to resolve our problem is to give Nigeria a new constitution. The search for that new constitution was what led myself and my partner in my law office, Mr. Ralph Nwoke, to raise the draft constitution to which you have alluded. What we did was simple. My people, the Yorubas, have a proverb. They say, if you don't know where you're going, you must know where you're coming from. The last time the Nigerians spoke and expressed their will was in the 1963 Constitution. It went through a proper Constituent Assembly process. There were proper plebiscites and referendums. The will of the people were exercised. So what we did was that we took the 1963 Constitution. We then took the recommendations of the different constitutional conferences, whether we call them jamborees or not. Some measure of will were expressed. The Abacha one, the Obasanjo one, and the Jonathan one. There is a consensus that has emerged amongst Nigerians that Nigeria should be essentially comprised of 6 regions. That's what they refer to as the political zones. So what we did was to take these regions, which had actually begun to emerge through the works of the Willings Commission in 1958, through the different arguments at the Constituent Assemblies pre-independence and leading to the Republican Constitution. We then created a draft based on the 1963 Constitution, enlarging the regions to the 6 geopolitical zones. We then advocated a return to federalism. What we have today, don't let's fool ourselves. A federal government does not create federating units. Local governments created by the federal government cannot be the basis for revenue allocation. Those are the things that are making people go crazy when they look at what we call federation in Nigeria today. The reality is that we are in truth a feudal entity pretending to even be a unitary system, because the British with their unitary system, power is at least devolved. So what we've done is to devolve powers based on the 1963 model. We tweaked it slightly by increasing the number of regions, by introducing elements that account for the equation of time and what has happened, all we have done is to seek a way forward. It is interesting that people who are by far more intelligent than myself, the likes of Professor Sage, who surprisingly was advocating much the same thing. Chief Afe Babalola was saying much the same thing very recently. So now the question is, how do we now birth a new constitution? There are two parts to this. The National Assembly, as currently constituted, as I've already said, has the legality, even though it lacks the legitimacy. It might decide to do the honorable thing and listen to the yearnings of Nigeria. It is not, and it has not displayed any capacity for leadership or courage. So I am not expecting or holding my breath that they will do anything of the sort. They will stick with this, their review, and unfortunately the opportunity for a smooth, perhaps much peaceful and more convivial opportunity for the switch will be lost, because they will come with a lie and it will still end up back where we are. But the alternative part is simple, and that is the part that we have been advocating. In the absence of a readiness by the legal apparatus of the states, that is the parliament, to take the radical revolutionary steps required to turn Nigeria around, it then falls on those of us who believe that there is a second path for Nigeria, to engage with the Nigerian people constantly, educating them on the need for this turnaround. And then when there is a critical mass that is engaged and understands, and not just understands in Lagos, there is no use calling out a crowd in Lagos if the same crowd is not replicated in Kaduna, if the same Nigerians are not stepping out in Kankara. Reality is that Nigerians are, all Nigerians are similarly afflicted, except the ruling class. Some member of the same ruling class said recently that there are only two classes of Nigerians, the rulers and the ruled, the oppressed and the oppressors. So fact of the matter is, when the oppressors begin to understand the commonalities of their afflictions, and they then begin to talk to themselves and understand that until this fundamental change to our governance structures are made, we are not going to go anywhere. The constitution that we have proposed, it is in its entirety sufficient to deal with our problems once we are open-minded enough to face the truth and seek to tell them to ourselves.
On a final note, we are out of time, but in 20 or 30 seconds, if you may, Mr. Farotimi, so our journey is going to be farther than we imagine if we go the amendment route. Is that what you're saying? And if you're saying so, if we choose to go the amendment way, then this insecurity situation might persist. Is that what you're saying?
Let me tell you something, Sheon. Since I have only 30 seconds, I'll be quick. If I am heading to Badagry, I am in Lekki, if I'm going to Badagry, but instead of heading towards VI so that I could make my way to the mainland and then over to Badagry, if I headed to Ekpe instead, if I like, I can travel for the next 1 year. I'm not going to get to Badagry. Nigeria is lying to itself, and the Senate and the House of Reps, everybody will be lying to themselves if they believe that they can somehow paint a defective structure to cure the structural defect. They are lying to themselves. It's a waste of time. The constitution they are trying to panel beat lasted all of 4 years and 3 months. That's the 1979 constitution. That's what they have panel beaten and turned into the 1999 constitution. It lasted 4 years, 3 months. This one has survived this long based on the illusion of hope. That illusion of hope evaporated with the election of our current president. It evaporated. They cannot sustain this lie much further. Nigeria is falling around everybody's ears. So yes, Nigeria has two choices. All-out implosion or war that is already happening all around us. Just because we live in the cocoon of Lagos, we forget. It is either that, or we consciously awaken as a people and demand the change that is required to save our country, or Nigeria will die. That one you can go and write down. I'm not a prophet of doom, but you cannot sustain an injustice called Nigeria in its current form for much longer. It will not survive.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dele Farotimi. The part where Nigeria will die, we forbid it, and we hope that will not happen.
You can pray and forbid you. If you don't act, you can pray, you can forbid. Nigerians love praying, binding, and casting. We are lying to ourselves. Walk and pray. When we are done praying for God forbid and all of that, if we do not get off our collective lazy, we'll be in trouble.
Dele Farotimi, thank you so much indeed for your time tonight. And that's our show for today. Thanks so much, everyone, for watching. Bye for now.